This podcast is for educational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you need legal assistance about a legal problem, contact an attorney.
If you're a licensed professional early in your career and you've ever wondered what actually triggers a board investigation, I'm glad you've tuned in. This is Know Your Regulator. I'm your host, Cimone Murphy, and today we are going to break down those common compliance blind spots that quietly lead to professional licensing issues, especially early in your career. Most professionals assume that disciplinary action only happens after there's been some sort of extreme misconduct, that a dramatic violation has to occur for trouble to brew. But the reality is that many professional licensing board investigations begin with preventable compliance mistakes. This is not about fear. I don't want you to be overly paranoid that you're going to go out and commit a violation. This is about regulatory literacy because that's crucial to preventing these violations. Once you hold a professional license, you operate within a regulatory framework, whether you think about it daily or not. So let's talk about what the boards actually evaluate and dive into it. One of the most common compliance misunderstandings early in practice is that your employer is not your regulator. Employers manage day-to-day operations, and professional licensing boards regulate individual licenses. And those are obviously not the same thing. Early in your career, though, you rely on onboarding, you're relying on supervisors, and you kind of rely on this is how our office does it. That can become your compass, your North Star. But even though it seems like you're doing everything right and you're getting this internal approval, that does not always equal compliance. When a complaint is filed and a board investigation begins, the board does not evaluate your employer's office culture. They're evaluating your individual conduct as a license holder. And you may be questioned on if you understand your scope of practice. Did you verify any delegation requirements? Did you comply with your board's rules? Did you exercise independent professional judgment? Following your workplace policy doesn't override these board rules and regulations. And when something goes wrong, your employer's legal team is going to protect the business, not you as the individual license holder. This blind spot is really common in early career professionals who just don't yet see that difference between their employer's operational policy and then regulatory compliance with their governing state agency. It's very important to remember that the board is evaluating you and your license. Let's look at one of the most straightforward triggers of a board investigation, the failure to comply with mandatory reporting requirements. Many professional licensing boards require self-reporting of certain criminal charges within a defined time frame. Often it's within 30 days of arrest. And I want to make this clear, it's not within 30 days of conviction, it's within 30 days of arrest. And so here's how this commonly unfolds, and this is true for an early career professional and a seasoned one too. Let's say that you are arrested for a misdemeanor. Maybe it's a DWI, something that could be unrelated to your work, and you hire a criminal defense attorney. The advice you get from that attorney is, let's just wait and see how this resolves. So you do what your attorney asks. You wait. You don't report it to your licensing board because you think it's not a big deal. It didn't happen at work. It's pretty minor. It's going to get dismissed and it hasn't been finalized. Those are all probably really common thoughts that go through your head when you're in a situation like this. But your professional licensing reporting requirements are totally separate from a criminal case strategy. We've seen cases like this where a criminal defense attorney didn't understand the implications that the criminal case can have on an administrative case with the licensing boards. So this really speaks to the importance of finding an attorney who understands what's at stake thoroughly, right? But anyways, when the case resolves, whether the outcome is reduced, deferred, dismissed, you just move forward and continue on with your life. You think that that's behind you. But months later, during a renewal or a background check that's now routine, the board learns about your arrest. And now the board is evaluating two different issues, right? The criminal charge and the failure to report. This is where that compliance blind spot becomes really serious, right? Your license is at risk here. Across licensing boards, candor and honesty are foundational expectations. They are expecting that you be forthcoming with information, honest and transparent. And they're not expecting perfection. The original arrest may be treated as an isolated lapse in judgment, right? But because professional licensure is built on trust and transparency, especially to the public, the failure to disclose can raise much bigger concerns, right? They're going to look at, why did you not report it? Was your omission intentional? And what does this say about your professional integrity? Many professionals, especially early in their career, are really surprised to learn that non-disclosure can result in a separate violation. And here's the part that is very rarely emphasized during any part of your onboarding. It's that mandatory reporting rules are your responsibility to understand once you're licensed. A lot of professionals assume that their employers or supervisors may have this on their top of mind awareness, but they don't. It's your responsibility to understand these requirements when you are a licensed individual. Many professionals will say that no one told them, and they're often right. Like I said, they assume that someone else has got that information. But again, when you hold a license, that regulatory compliance becomes part of your professional duty, right? It's up to you. That's your responsibility. Now, your failure to report has become a way bigger issue than the original charge, you know? It's very important that you treat this with honesty and transparency. Any type of correspondence with the board, that's what they're looking for. Another big blind spot that we see is professional boundaries. Not in a social media sense, although we talk a lot about that, and that's important to have too, but in a regulatory sense. Early in your career, you are wanting to build trust, you're wanting to build reputation, you want to grow your business, you just want to be helpful. You're maybe willing to bend over backwards so that you can gain that, right? You are giving maybe informal advice to your friends, you're continuing advising former clients informally, and you're offering maybe some quick guidance without any documentation. But that can really come back to bite you. It feels very harmless, but the licensing boards evaluate your structure and how you do things, your process. You need to be prepared to answer questions like, was there a formal professional relationship? Was this interaction documented? Was there a dual relationship, perhaps? Was there maybe a power imbalance, a little bit more of authority on your side? Professional boundaries are not personality traits. Some people can be really intimidated by saying no or refusing someone, but you have to be willing to separate your own ego. These are your regulatory safeguards. Boundaries don't often begin with bad intent. I don't think anyone wakes up and intends to commit a violation. It begins with being informal, being too casual, and that informality can create a lot of exposure to your license. We're talking exposure to risk, violation, sanction, revocation, even, especially when the expectations are unclear and there isn't any documentation to explain. You have to make sure that you can back up anything that you say with documentation for the board. Almost like a sister to the professional boundaries blind spot is scope creep. And again, like professional boundaries, this doesn't usually feel reckless. For many professionals, a scope creep issue feels like growth. You're taking continuing education, you've observed experienced professionals, maybe your peers, and you feel more than capable, right? So it's only natural when someone says, "Hey, can you handle this?" It's similar to what you already do. You're qualified, right? And you say yes. But the scope of practice is not about feeling competent, or even if under some qualifications you may think that you're approved to perform the task. It's 100% about authorization under your specific license for that specific task, right? Boards evaluating scope of practice compliance ask, does your license explicitly permit this service? Are you allowed to do this? Is additional certification required? Was supervision required? Are you supposed to be supervised when performing this task? And does this cross into another board's jurisdiction? Do you need to hold a different license to perform this task? Early professionals are very eager to prove themselves, but without that regulatory clarity, you can create some unnecessary risk that could set you back at the very beginning of your career. Your intent does not negate or neutralize your compliance requirements with your regulatory boards. You have to know the scope of what you're performing and if you are approved to perform that. Now, as we continue through the episode, I feel like it's important to highlight that not every complaint results in discipline, right? Not every compliance issue results in a license suspension or revocation, and not every reporting mistake leads to these severe consequences. Many board investigations result in dismissals or some sort of remedial education, maybe a warning letter. There are a lot of options for non-disciplinary outcomes. But these investigations are time consuming, they are stressful, they are reputationally significant, they are expensive. The goal of this episode is not to instill fear in you. This is about proactive compliance awareness. Being aware of these blind spots in your career, in your industry, helps you prevent them because long, successful professional careers are built on competence and regulatory literacy. Sharpening your regulatory awareness is only going to help you minimize that risk and protect your license. So, we've talked a lot about these blind spots, but let's talk about how to identify and prevent them, right? If you're early in your career, here is how you should be operating. You first need to separate your employer policy from board regulations. Understand that your employer is not your governing licensing board. There are rules and regulations that even they may not be adhering to. Two, understand your mandatory reporting requirements before you need them. And that is your responsibility. Your supervisor, employer, they may not have that on hand. It's up to you to understand what you as an individual license holder are held to. Number three, you need to maintain structured professional boundaries, online and offline. Number four, verify your scope of practice before expanding your services or performing a task. Make sure that you are licensed and authorized to perform the task that you are about to perform. And number five, when you are uncertain, please pause and seek clarity before moving on. Before acting on anything, consult with an expert attorney, speak to a legal representative, your union. There's someone out there who can help you and clarify what you need. Like I said, board investigations don't always begin with some sort of dramatic misconduct. They begin with these compliance blind spots, and those blind spots shrink with regulatory awareness. Your professional license is not just a credential, guys. It's your professional responsibility and it's your livelihood. This is what you went to school to do. This is how you make money. This is your income. If you want to better understand how professional licensing boards evaluate conduct and compliance, that is what we're here for. Subscribe, share, and drop a comment below on what other blind spots that you've noticed in your industry. Help out your peers. Share this regulatory awareness. Until next time, stay inspired and continue engaging with your regulatory agency.
Know Your Regulator, the podcast that inspires you to engage.